And right now, their latest thing, which is getting quite popular, is foreign flags. They don't want any foreign flags in Canada. Canada has to be Canada first, only Canadian flags, only the maple leaf. And you can see in this right here, it turns out she has been to pro-Israeli rallies where she's given speeches where they were obviously brandishing a lot of Israeli flags. Right here, speaking on a megaphone by someone who's got the Israeli flag draped around them. Here's another photo.
Of Indigenous culture. We're told Indigenous communities existed outside the flaws of human nature, frozen in moral perfection until Europeans arrived. This myth is repeated so often that questioning it is treated as heresy. But it has become a shield that excuses failure, blocks accountability, and funnels billions of tax dollars into black holes of corruption with little to show for it. In no serious country would it be normal for governments to pour staggering sums into reserves while families live in mold-ridden homes and boil water on stoves because local leaders can't keep a treatment plant working.
So, I just want to quickly debunk everything he says because they are racist lies. And I can start with the fact that the myth of Indigenous people being these noble cultures is a form of racism. There's different forms of calling Indigenous people a monolith because there's just so many different cultures, languages, and societies and bands. And in America, Native American tribes, very, just again, these are different groups of people and entirely different languages and cultures. It's actually quite fascinating when you go into the deep dive. But in Canada, there's this myth amongst the far right, and especially white supremacists, that the country sucks, not because of capitalism, not because of billionaires, not because of corporations taking up all the resources, but because of Indigenous people who are stealing all the monies from you hardworking white folk kind of thing. And the idea that all the money gets taken from the government and then given to reserves, and then the reserves have all of these tribal leaders or band leaders who unfortunately squander all the cash is 100% a lie. It's the federal government, actually, that doles out the amount of money that they give to Indian reserves in Canada, and they're also the ones that kept it at a very low amount intentionally as part of systemic racism. That amount was 2%, and it was always said that it needed to be more, but it's always been inadequate in being able to deal with the problems of all the reserves in the country. The reserves of all the Indigenous bands in Canada, they are groups of people who were basically forced into areas and parts of the country far away from the cities and where a lot of the development was going, far away from white folk, essentially was the idea. And they would push them into very, very remote areas and then usually squish a lot of different bands together, as in people who had different languages, people had different cultures, suddenly were forced to live in the same area. And then those areas were obviously for generations and generations struggling deeply, and in many cases not having infrastructure, not having clean drinking water, and to this day don't have clean drinking water. So this is actually a problem of the federal government. There's very few autonomous, and this is what's important, autonomous bands that actually get to dictate what they do with their own money, what they do with their own land, what they do with their own resources. The majority of them fall under what's called the Indian Act in Canada, and that means the federal government actually gets to oversee how much money they give them, how much they allocate at any given time for them to spend on hospitals, schools, infrastructure, and it's always been a pittance. And so this idea that they get given billions of dollars, and then those billions of dollars get stolen by corrupt leaders who then keep it all for themselves, enrich themselves, and then just live off all of this wealth, and then while the rest of the people suffer, that's where the whole racist lie comes in.
Meanwhile, many chiefs and administrators presiding over these communities live in comfort and drive luxury SUVs. No auditor pushes too hard, no politician asks where the money went, because it's easier to just repeat the same script. Blame Canadians, cut a check, and hope that nobody notices where the money is going. The infantilization runs deeper than just budgets. Look at Richmond, BC, where private property is now being seized by the state because a tribe fished there centuries ago.
Also, a lie. No one's losing their private property. This was a land dispute between two different Indigenous bands, and that's still something that's going to be settled in higher courts. But as of right now, the Cowichan tribe said, just flat out, no one's losing their homes. There's actually not been a land battle victory that's been won in Canada where people have gotten large amounts of land and then the property owners lost it. I can give you an example. One of the richest parts of Vancouver just got given a land back victory by the Squamish Nation, and that area has a lot of the most expensive homes in Vancouver, right on, the beachfront properties kind of stuff. And a lot of the rich folks there, especially the NIMBYs, lost their shit, and they were like, oh my God, we're all going to lose our mansions. They're going to be repossessed by, this Indigenous band and all this kind of stuff. stuff. Never happened. The people got to keep their very fancy homes. The land title, instead of going to the King of England, which is what, when you buy a house in Canada, your land title is actually owned by the King of England. Technically, it's owned by what's called the Crown. In this case, it actually is now owned by the Indigenous band, but you keep your property. They get to decide what to do with the land in terms of building upon it, resource allocation, extraction, so that's what happens. And what they did in in Vancouver, but in now what is called Squamish Nation territory, they built a whole bunch of housing. That was what happened there, and it's pretty cool. They're not done yet, but the buildings are already up, and I've driven past them. They're enormous buildings, and it's going to be a mix of low income social housing, but also expensive housing, because it's their determinants on what they want to do on their own land, and they're going to be building lots and lots of property on it. That's what they're doing right now. So again, it's wild that this stuff is exploding in popularity in the country right now. It's all based on lies, but it's the same thing in the United States for people blaming all of their problems. This is what MAGA's doing with immigrants. You'll notice that a lot of the problems that are being created by the ruling elites, by the rich, by billionaires, by corporations, they get passed off to people who don't have as much power in society, because it's way easier to get everyone to band together and to vilify them. So in America, you get immigrants, you get trans kids, and the same thing here, but there's a much bigger focus in Canada and the far right here on Indigenous people and on the battle going on between Indigenous people fighting for their rights, for their land, etc. And this idea that there is a lot of poor Canadians, and that is true. 1 in 4 Canadians right now lives with food insecurity, which is a massive problem and something that does need to be addressed. But rather than actually try and help, and rather than provide better social safety nets or school lunch programs for kids or things like that, you can turn all your anger towards Indigenous people who are stealing all of your land, who are also stealing all of your money, because your tax dollars go towards paying them, and then they're wasting all the money, and they live in poverty, and there's all this addiction, and there's all this crime. And so we keep throwing money at the problem, and it's not fixing anything. And the truth is, no, historically, for years in Canada, the amount that has been given to Indigenous reserves has been so little that they have been struggling because the federal government has intentionally been keeping them in poverty. This has been done with intent. This is why, when I talk about this, I bring up systemic racism, and I bring up the fact that this is a system working as it's intended. And that same system is then being blamed for other people's poverty. And there is a lot, and I'll repeat this, a lot of poor white people in Canada, and a lot of poor white people struggling. But the cause of their struggles is not Indigenous people. Just like the cause of the struggles of poor white people in America is not foreigners, is not immigrants. They're not coming into the country and taking up all the jobs. This vilification works really well because on a base level, everyone's already got all this shit programmed inside them. It's very easy to just sit there and be like, life sucks. Why is it? Well, it's the government taking your money. Right, but then we do get some stuff for it. We get roads, we get some infrastructure. I think that's an okay thing. Right, but they also give a lot of it to immigrants. Did you know that? They take your money in the form of taxation, and then they give it to lazy people who don't want to work, who just live off fudge rounds. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is to take your money and they give it to foreigners. Yeah, illegals come into the country. When they get here, they get free healthcare, free housing. That's the reason there's a housing crisis, is because of the illegals. They keep coming into the country and stealing all our stuff. In Canada, the reason there's a housing crisis is because our land keeps getting taken by Indigenous people. Same story, but just working over and over. Well, guess who's protected the whole time? Billionaires, the elites, the people you keep hearing about that sometimes you'll hear just said vaguely by the Alex Joneses, right? It's the elites, it's the Davos group and all that kind of stuff. But it's like there is actually billionaires, multi-millionaires who are fucking the entire world over. And they need people like this to promote these ideas. There's a white supremacist party that is now their slogan: Canada was built, not stolen. We didn't steal Canada. We built it. White people built it. This is Nazi shit. It sucks because it's Nazi shit done not by blatantly saying we're white supremacists, we are the superior race. They don't have to go that far. You can just do something like this that seems relatively benign, and other people will share it. People will share this picture, share this slogan, share this line, and start repeating it and being like, we built this country. We didn't steal it. We built it. We made the roads. We made all of this kind of stuff, and it's working. This stuff is going viral. This has 1.3 million views, 14,000 likes. A lot of people, some of them might not even be overt racist. They might not be, people who will call out, black people the N-word on the street, but they'll share this kind of shit, and they'll share it just by being like, well, I mean, at the end of the day, is it not true? Like, what was the country before? It was nothing, right? It was a bunch of savages just killing each other and cannibalizing one another and stuff like that. And then we came over, and then we built roads, we built the railroads, we brought them NyQuil, all this wonderful stuff, and they should be thankful instead of always trying to make us feel guilty. And I'm tired of all the guilt. Which brings us to the ostrich farm. This story I'm only bringing up because there's protests now in the country, the ostrich protests, and they've begun. And I heard over the weekend there was going to be basically a complete Canadian-wide protest in support of the ostriches. And if you don't know the background to the story, there was an ostrich farm, which probably wouldn't have been a story at all, but here's how it goes. And these are the actual facts, by the way. This ostrich farm was not taking care of their ostriches. They raised ostriches to be slaughtered for meat, for oil, for other materials that you get from ostriches, including dog bones, by the way. And so that was what they were doing. They would raise ostriches, they would sell the ostriches for processing, those ostriches would get slaughtered, and then they would sell them. And that was the thing they did on a regular basis. Some of the ostriches caught avian flu, and they did not take care of them. They didn't do proper isolation procedures. Now, you don't necessarily, I thought you just get an instant cull. Like if you get avian flu, all the ostriches would just have to die. That's not even the full story. They were given the opportunity to actually take care of the ostriches. When one of the ostriches has avian flu, you have to isolate it from the rest of the herd, and then you have to do testing and get the testing overseen to make sure all the other birds haven't contracted it. The other interesting part about ostriches is that unlike chickens or their, small poultry, they actually can survive avian flu a lot better. They're more resilient. They live a lot longer. They have long lifespans. So they're an animal that can actually overcome getting avian flu. The problem is if a bird lands into the farm, gets avian flu, then flies away to another farm, lands in there, and then gives a bunch of chickens avian flu, that's how avian flu spreads into your meat supply. So avian flu is taken very seriously. Here's what happened. The farmers had a couple birds that got avian flu. They didn't take care of them. Then a lot of their birds got avian flu. Then their birds started dying. They were witnessing the ostriches bloating, getting diarrhea, vomiting, and then keeling over. And then finally, someone called it in. An anonymous person was walking by and was like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck is going on there? There's all these birds that are like swelling, bloating, shitting, and puking all over the place. Something's very fucked up there. So they called it in. Then the government got involved. And then at that point, they came in and were like, hey, by the way, your ostriches have avian flu. You need to take care of them. And they were given ample opportunity to do that. They said, hey, you have to follow proper safety procedures. Please isolate your ostriches, put the healthy ones here, put the unhealthy ones here, take care of them. We're just going to ask you to do, again, very basic measures to ensure that your herd and your flock is healthy and safe. And they didn't. Instead, they decided to turn this into a cause, a right-wing cause. They reached out to all the right-wing media in Canada, including Rebel News, who made a huge story out of it, which then reached American media. And once American pundits found out about this, they did what they always do. I can't believe the communist dictators of Canada are forcing these humble farmers who are just trying to make a living. They're going to slaughter their birds. This is disgusting. Shame on all of you. And that story got promoted by the right a lot here. And people, by the way, who didn't know the full story yet, myself included, I don't want to see ostriches die. I don't want to see the government come in and shoot a bunch of birds. That sounds horrible. I would rather the ostriches not get shot in the face. That also sounds very, very sad. So I'm not going to sit there and really talk about this while the right wing was just concentrating on the story. And I was like, I feel bad for the birds, but ultimately, it's a safety procedure. I thought it was as simple as one bird was detected with avian flu, and then they had to kill them all, and the farmers didn't want them to die. And for the first time ever, the right wing cared about animal welfare. Bunch of people camped outside the ostrich farm. Bunch of people were basically turning this into a cause. They were like living there 24/7 with megaphones and speakers, yelling at the neighbors and the other people who lived there. Very quiet community. They got really upset. They were committing acts of violence. One woman had gasoline doused on her house and got punched in the face, and she was an old lady. So the people who were living there were very mad about this. But these aren't vegans. I want to keep in mind, by the way, these are a bunch of people who only care about animal welfare in this one situation, because this one also involves the anti-vax angle, which is that there's a bunch of people who are still obsessed with COVID. They thought the whole thing was like apartheid in Canada. There was like apartheid for people with or without vaccines, and the big government was trying to inject you. That movement never died out. It just it's mutated, much like COVID does, and now it's mutated into the form of This is the big government coming in to basically kill these birds because one bird got sick and it got healthy. And that's their narrative and their story, and they're running with it. And some birds did get sick and get healthy. I want to stress that. That part is true because ostriches are more resilient to avian flu than other birds. But that doesn't mean the farmers were taking care of them. 69, actually over 69 birds, ostriches, had already died because they weren't taking care of them from avian flu before the government came in to shoot them. And they would not listen to them. And the government gave them so many chances to fix this thing and be like, please do the proper safety procedures. They refused to. They fundraised a fuck ton of money from Americans, by the way. There was a bunch of Americans who paid tons and tons of money. They got over $100,000 in support, you know, save our ostrich farm, all this kind of stuff. And they got more money, I think, than they probably would have gotten from the entire herd had they sold the ostriches. In addition to all of this, they lied to the government that their ostriches actually had special antibody properties and were resilient and able to survive avian flu, which would be an incredible discovery, one that has scientific merit. And the government believed them. And when they went to court, the government said, okay, we'll give you an opportunity to please demonstrate that, bring us the evidence of your claims, and they provided none. Because they had none. Because the birds who got over the avian flu just survived it because they were resilient because they're ostriches. Like, once you get into the details of this, these are just pieces of shit farmers who do not care about their own flock. Any farmer who raises like wildlife or you know, ostriches or pigs or anything like that will tell you that yes, you do have to maintain and take care of them. In this case, they weren't. And then they turned this into, well, we love our ostriches so much, they gave them names. One of them was called Fluffy. Like, people online were like, save Fluffy. Then near the end, they named one of them Charlie Kirk. I kid you not. They named one of the ostriches Charlie Kirk, hoping that would garner even more, you know, sympathy from Americans and right-wingers around the world and stuff like that for their cause. Long story short, the ostriches eventually were slaughtered by the government because, again, all these stages that went by, they just were refusing to take care of them. This is one of them.
Okay, she's dying alone. She's dying alone.
We got the footage.
Oh, Elon, what's going on? Fucking Elon, I hate his app so much.
She's dying alone. She's dying alone.
We got the footage, guys. It's gross.
She's dying alone. We would have never done that. Our birds don't die alone. They're loved by us. They're cared. She's alone, laying there, dying right there. We can't touch her. We can't be with her. They're not with her. They know she's dying because we did those.
So it's very powerful. You can see why right-wingers are obsessed with this and why it works so well. You send these clips around, and anyone who's on Facebook, especially boomers, right? Because a lot of the people are white boomers who showed up and camped out there. When they see this, it suddenly enacts something to you, your empathy, right? Like, it's really hard if you just saw this clip isolated by itself to be like, what's going on here? And I watched this, I'm like, damn, this lady, I feel really bad for her. Like, she clearly loves this animal. She's in distress. She's up against a fucking state authoritarian fucking pig. You know, what's this fucking cop doing, preventing her from you know, giving comfort and love to a dying animal? This is grotesque. It's fucked up. It's sick, actually. And I'm mad. I'm very, very mad. What's going on here? Well, it turns out, actually, the Canadian government is deciding to slaughter these birds because they think it gives them sexual powers. Yeah, that's right. They're going to get in there and they're going to get off when they shoot them in the face. That's what the Canadian government does. Yeah, from these humble farmers who were just trying to make a living, take care of their birds, and in comes these disgusting-ass Canadian authorities to shoot all these birds in the face. It's honestly, it's sick and it's depraved, and it's the Liberal government gone mad. And that worked. A lot of people are super, super mad, and so this happened. Leaders of Canada's newest convoy worry police are trying to sabotage a national protest avenging a flock of dead ostriches. This is the AI slop art that has been used for it. Organizers of a planned nationwide convoy this weekend protesting the culling of a flock of ostriches are disavowing violent supporters and insisting their protest will remain peaceful after attracting unwanted attention from police. The planned ostrich convoy, which is set to take place in cities across Canada November 22nd, bills itself as a grassroots farmer protest against the recent cull of 314 ostriches following an avian flu outbreak at a farm in Edgewood. The outbreak led to a protracted legal battle between the ostrich farm's owner and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that became a flashpoint for the Canadian right-wing alternative media outlets and far-right influencers associated with the Freedom Convoy. The outbreak led to the battle ultimately attracted the attention of people inside Donald Trump's White House, with former daytime TV host turned Medicare czar Dr. Oz offering the ostriches a sanctuary at his farm in Florida. Which, that's kind of funny that Dr. Oz was like, oh, I'll take the birds. And it's like, you're going to take a bunch of birds sick with avian flu. Actually, you know what? With the way that the regulations are working in the U.S., maybe you could have done that. Because I was going to say, there's ain't no way in hell that's going to be getting past border security, where you're like, yeah, I need to import 300 ostriches. And it's like, okay, yeah, they also all have avian flu. But, we'll take care of them. But you know what? With RFK Jr. and the way things are today, maybe he could have done that. The planned nationwide ostrich convoy originally spun out of a Facebook group created by Jim Kerr, a flamboyant convoy influencer best known for driving a psychedelic school bus called the Church of Bubbles, and a Dutch-born Gen Z social media marketer, Freck Shep, who runs a business importing maple syrup from New Brunswick to Utrecht. The Dutch. I knew it was the Dutch. Had to be the Dutch. This is the Church of Bubbles, if you wanted to see, and this is the other guy. The lekkerst maple syrup van Canada, nature sweetness. So there you have it. The government through the RCMP are trying to scare people not to come to the friggin' thing. In another video, Kerr alleged the police are threatening the organizers of the ostrich convoy. Take a look at this.
All of our freedoms are being taken away. Our ability to be able to communicate with one another is being taken away. Censorship is stripping down our ability to say what's on our hearts, what's on our minds. Okay? The government, through enforcement, through RCMP, are trying to scare people not to come to the friggin' thing. It kind of happened to me last night. Yeah, I was at dinner with my wife, and I got a call saying that the police had contacted my son. Now, that offends me. I don't like that idea. I'm not sure why they would have done that. And at the time, I was kind of gutted. I'm like, why are you contacting my family right now? I mean, I'm quite confident it has something to do with the Farmers Protest Canada, because I'm throwing my support behind that. You know what an RCMP guy said to this? A little bit more than middle-aged or older-aged woman.
If he had a little bit more rasp to his voice, he'd sound like Jordan Peterson. You know what the bloody hell the RCMP are saying to me?
that had put out a flyer. She was going to do a thing in a province. You know what they said to her? You know what happened to Tamara Litch and Chris Barber, right? You don't want that to happen to you. You're going to get a $290 ticket if you're driving too slow, or a couple of points off your thing. Now, that was enough to deter this young lady, and that's okay. Because if you don't want ramifications, don't get into war. But the problem is, you are in a war. You know that the government isn't your friend. You know that any government that's willing to come in and wholesale slaughter healthy animals without testing them first.
And so here's, again, getting to the crux of the whole thing, the belief system that is really sold effectively on the right. The right wing, indigenous people are the cause of your problems. Immigrants are the cause of your problems. And then the third big baddie, the government, big bad government, are the cause of your problems. And those are the three. They obviously, they never go after, billionaires, multimillionaires, corporations, stuff like that. They usually try and attack things that they think are infringing on their freedoms, because a lot of them might also have a lot of freedoms already. And so when they want to just say take things a little bit further than they're used to, suddenly it's like, oh, well, now the government's encroaching on me. Don't step on Sneck, that kind of stuff, right? You know, don't tread on me. Barber, along with another convoy leader, Tamara Lynch, were convicted on charges of mischief, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, a lot of the same overlap between the convoy organizers and, you know, the ones who did the Ottawa occupation, and now the ostrich movement in Canada, which is growing very rapidly. It is a silly time. I mean, you know, I'm sure some people think this is fucking Darling, the most Canadian controversy of, you know, fascism ever. It's like, hey, we're dealing with fucking ICE over here, you know, taking children from their mothers. Y'all are dealing with the fucking ostrich revolution. I mean, that sounds nice. I think I'd prefer the ostrich revolution. Like, you know, at least they care about something. You know, it's fascists caring about ostriches, not about animal welfare. I want to stress this, by the way. These people are eating buckets of chicken, fucking KFC, churches, you name it. They're just save damn ostriches. I can't believe they're fucking taking away our freedoms. Because again, this is because of the anti-vax, anti-science angle. Pedophilia Pedophilia can't be cured. Cull pedos, not healthy animals. Ah. What? I gotta make me a sign, so while I'm talking about them pedophiles, not them birds. Justice for animals. Cull the sick birds. Do not slaughter 300 LT ostriches. No more secrets. We support farmers. C for transparency, not pharma. That's another key part, not pharma. And again, I do want to stress this. They had every opportunity by the Canadian Inspection Agency to take care of them ostriches. It was not like they showed up one day, hey, we got an anonymous tip and we're here with guns to shoot all the ostriches in the face. It was, hi, we got an anonymous tip about the fact that a lot of ostriches, over 60 of them, have died on your farm. Bloating, diarrhea, pretty horrifying ways to die, and you're not taking care of them. So out of the interest of animal welfare, we want to ask you, can you please take care of your ostriches? And they're like, thank you very much, good day. And then they came back and they're like, hey, you haven't done shit. You're still not taking care of the ostriches. More are getting sick and dying. Avian flu, it's spreading. Please do something. And then I was like, well, you can't tread on me, goddamn government, trying to come in here and force me to not have to take care of my birds. I'll show you. And then turned it into, again, a very effective right-wing cause, which is still going on now. Tyrannical Mrs. May, thank you very much for the raid. Can everyone go to twitch.tv/Tyrannical Mrs. May and give Tyrannical Mrs. May a follow back. Meeting place at 1454. This is where some of the protests are going to take place, blah, blah, blah. And now I get to show all of you the protests. Oh, I thought I had it queued up. Well, all right. Just imagine that was an amazing transition, and I'm definitely not scrolling through my Twitter right now looking for the... here it is. I found it. Now I get to show you the protest. You get to see the cross-nation pro-ostrich protest taking place across the country. It's stunning, absolutely. And this is what it looks like.
Etc. I think we got Airdrie here. Where's Airdrie? Airdrie! Woo! All right. Okay, so we got our peeps from Airdrie. So we're going to do a couple of passes past the CFIA, and then we're going to head over, etc. I think we got Airdrie here.
Now, not, I'm sure, the numbers they were hoping for. If you had told me that this wasn't the ostrich protest, and this was a bunch of people meeting in a Tim Hortons parking lot because there was a new sale or a double-double going down, I wouldn't have believed you. I'd be like, wait, what's going on here? It turns out not a lot of people were crazy excited to I guess take their weekend off and protest on behalf of the birds as much as the online right thought it was. And here's the thing. You hear that Twitter's not real life, and it actually is in some ways. It can be a reflection of life, but also if your government officials start to take their public policy from Twitter the way Trump does, I want everyone to see the way that Trump actually can be very influenced by the far right, because a lot of what they do online, when it gets lots of traction, you'll hear those echoed by the things the president says out loud. It's very weird to see things online for a couple days and be like, wow, that's a fucked up thing going on there, and then have the president say it out loud, where he's like, hey, by the way, I believe that we need to, invade this country because this country happens to be massacring a bunch of Christians, and I care so much about my beloved Christians, and the fact that this country is massacring a bunch of people that are Christian specifically, not anyone else, just Christians. Maybe we should go and invade this country. I don't know. How do y'all feel about Nigeria? Why don't we start there, right? And then it's like, well, that's a weird thing, sir, just because the groups that are actually you say responsible for the massacre of Christians in that part of the world are actually massacring Muslims at a much larger rate, Boko Haram specifically. And if this is a problem you care about, then the solution is not to invade it and in order to liberate it. And you should also be looking towards the fact that are you aware that these Christians aren't white? I'm curious about that as well, because I think that might be an upsetting realization. But he'll say it out loud, and he'll make a public policy, and then who knows? Maybe it'll lead to an invasion. In the same way that there's a lot of invasions that are about to take place, say like Venezuela, being done in large part because people are spreading a lot of propaganda that Venezuela is actually the fentanyl capital of the world, manufacturing fentanyl, which goes into these boats, and these boats then drive up all the way to the United States because they can definitely do that in vessels that size. And so those vessels deserve to be just like fucking murked, glassed out of nowhere, just blown up and then blow up again and then blow up again. Where, I mean, a lot of those people most likely are fishing boats who are actually trying to make a living and feed their families. But hey, why not just tell everybody that they are Venezuelan narco traffickers who are trying to sail up and kill Americans, because then we can justify just blowing them up on a regular and repeated basis. And it does spread, and it does work. And then eventually, you can get to people like the Premier of Alberta spreading a new law named after Jordan Peterson, the Jordan Peterson Law.
Disciplining people for simply speaking their mind on their own time, that's overreach. And at its worst, it becomes an outright threat to free expression.
Alberta's latest legislation taking aim at how professional bodies limit free speech. Its proposed Regulated Professionals Neutrality Act, limiting groups like Alberta's College of Physicians and Surgeons or the Law Society of Alberta from disciplining members for expressing opinions while not on the clock. There are some exceptions. For example, the comments cannot threaten violence or misuse the professional's position with an intent to harm.
Sometimes it's hazy where the workplace ends and the personal life begins. These cases are cropping up because of the ubiquity of social media, where regulated professionals are chiming in on hot button issues in the new digital public square.
2 years ago, Dr. Jordan Peterson, a clinical psychologist, podcaster, and author, was disciplined by Ontario's College of...
Yeah, so if you're wondering, there's a set of standards that you're supposed to abide by if you work in a certain profession. Say that you happen to be part of the Nurses Society. You as a nurse do have a certain amount of authority because you are representative of a body or an organization that has an authority on certain topics, right? So if you're a nurse and you're going out there and you're telling everybody, hey, by the way, if you drink maple syrup, it'll, cure your erectile dysfunction. The more maple syrup you drink, the more you cure it. So get out there, boys, and start swilling and chugging that sweet, sweet brown goo. That could result in a lot of people getting sick for a variety of reasons and then harm them. So it's in their interest, right? If you are a governing body, especially of a medical association, to not have people who work for that medical association be able to spew whatever weird conspiratorial nonsense they want. The problem is that there's a handful of people who are into the nurses organization, or they happen to be psychologists or psychiatrists, who are also transphobes. One of the prominent examples is the guy on screen right now, Dr. Jordan Peterson. And a problem with him is if he doesn't want to actually adhere to his own field of study, his own discipline, if he doesn't want to have to do research and learn about the differences between sex and gender, and the idea of it being a spectrum, which again is something that he could very easily just do a little bit more. Like his knowledge on the topic kind of stops at around 1992 or 4. But then there's been, obviously, and this is the great thing and cool thing about science, is that we learn more things about the human experience as we go on. I know it was really controversial when Bill Nye the Science Guy came back for another season, or a couple seasons, I can't remember if it was 1 or 2, of his show on Netflix. He got a Netflix reboot, and he did Bill Nye the Science Guy, and he wants to talk in that series about more modern discoveries in science that he was really, really excited about. And one of those episodes happened to be on human sexuality and sex and gender and stuff like that. And he went into the new body of research on this to talking about a whole bunch of things. People who have differences of sexual development, people who have different kinds of chromosomal pairings that we've discovered, right? XXX, XXY, for example. People who are born, say, with XY chromosomes, but then because of the amount of testosterone or other hormones that their body regulates and releases, actually can develop as what we normally associate with being a man or a woman. And this is how you get people of differences of sexual development. You can be someone who is identified as a woman, lived their entire lives as a woman, would be on the street, anyone would point out and be like, yes, you're a woman, you have long hair, big breasts, all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden discover that you have testicles inside of your body, stuff like that. This happens all the time. In fact, the percentage of people who have differences of sexual development is higher than the amount of people who have red hair on the planet. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that neat? Isn't that a wonderful part of the human experience that I didn't even have any idea about? I love learning. Learning is so fucking cool. Science is awesome. This is what I thought it would be. And instead, it's Bill Nye the Science Guy is a gender ideologist, disgusting, woke, deplorable, who's trying to push gender ideology and child mutilation on your kids. And then everyone's like, wait, what? No. He learned a new thing and he's excited to teach it to you. This is what all the good scientific communicators throughout history have done. Doesn't matter if it's Bill Nye the Science Guy, doesn't matter if it's Carl Sagan. It's really neat when they do this because not all of us sitting at home have learned at the current cusp of where the current research is at. And I love that. I love that there are communicators, really good scientific communicators, who will take all these new discoveries and then introduce them to a whole new generation of people, where now to talk about things like the amount of planets that are in the solar system, how things like perhaps quantum foam works. These aren't just like science fiction concepts. You can actually like assume the everyday person will have a certain basis of knowledge where they're going to be like, yeah, that's not completely out of the realm of possibility for me to understand this concept or talk about these kind of things. And that furthers the human experience. It's a wonderful, miraculous, and beautiful part of living. In fact, I cannot stress enough how much I love this shit. And then we get to people like Jordan Peterson where it disagrees with their bigotries. There's a part of them where like, oh, well, then I'm not going to believe that. You see, what happened is science got perverted, it did, by an agenda of gender ideology. And what happened was gender ideology came in, and then they forced all these scientists to believe a bunch of strange things. And it's like, no, that's not the way science works. This is based on observation. This is based on being able to replicate certain things within conditions of testing. This is based on double-blind testing, so that it doesn't, you know what, it doesn't matter. But if you're going to shut your brain off at a certain point because all of a sudden what we discover about everything, just life itself, becomes inconvenient for your biases, well, then that's not scientific. You're just a bigot. And now that you've been approved because you're Dr. Jordan Peterson or Dr. Richard Dawkins, well, you can use that doctorate to then further your bigotry to a whole new generation of people who are like, see, I've got a really esteemed doctor, Dr. Jordan Peterson. He says that he's an evolutionary biologist. He's not, though. He lied when he said that out loud. He's not an evolutionary biologist at all. He just said that because he just can say things, right? Same way that he was saying that he had found this old ancient picture of snakes being coiled up, and he thought this was the original discovery of DNA. It wasn't. That's just not true. That he's just making shit up. He can do that. He's a human. We can make up anything we want. I can make up anything I want right now and try and convince you all that it's real. That doesn't make it to be true. But yeah, there are people who will do that, and there are people who are going to abuse their doctorates and their powers to then push their agenda on people. Well, that's what Dr. Jordan Peterson does. That's what Dr. Richard Dawkins unfortunately does now. And in that case, that's actually kind of funny because Dr. Richard Dawkins is an evolutionary biologist and he does have authority on the top book and can talk with a certain degree, I would say, of even like people will have admiration for him, myself in the past included, because I loved a lot of his work. I read a lot of Richard Dawkins' books, and he was also a very good scientific communicator on evolution. And then when it came to things like sex, gender, human sexuality, well, that's where a lot of them just shut off. Or the idea that not every single Muslim is actually trying to kill every single white person and Christian, well, that's just not compatible with their worldview. They don't like that. They're like, no. There's actually something in the Quran that when you get to a certain point, you read a secret coded amount of text. I don't know what it is about those words in order, but when you read that line, people become radicalized. And that's unfortunately the reason why every single Muslim becomes radicalized to kill white people. And I'm not trying to be racist. I can't be, because that's not a race, all right? That's a religion. I'm not a racist. Talk to Sam Harris. He knows. Again, when you read the text, it's there, and you can't help yourself. You got to blow things up. That's what they do. And then you're sitting there, and you're like, that sucks though, because like you were so smart, and you were really, really clever and really good at talking about evolution, and I liked it. And now that you're talking about that, you sound like a fucking racist. Absolute ghouls you see before your eyes. This is Dallas Brodie. She used to be a part of the Conservative Party, and she was kicked out of the Conservative Party for being too racist. Yeah, they are anti-vaxxers. They hate LGBTQ plus people. They frequently attack trans kids. They've really been spending a lot of time going after Indigenous people lately, trying to say that Indigenous people are trying to steal your property and your property values. And they've been trying to do all the extreme far-right shit that they can pull off. And they've had quite a bit of success in one corner of the world only, and that would be online on the Nazi app, Twitter. And that's where they've actually been getting quite a bit of likes and retweets and shares, to the point where other far-right conservatives have been like, holy shit, they're making waves, because, I see the numbers, they speak for themselves. And it's actually made the BC Conservative Party start to put out a lot of the same messaging, such as Canada was not stolen, Canada was actually built, and it was built by white people. Brave white pioneers developed this nation. So they're actually doing what a lot of leftists try to do by having further left candidates run, or have further left candidate parties to try and pull, say, libs and centrists to the left. They're successfully pulling the right-wing party all the way into the Nazi territory, and now they're kind of having a Nazi off back and forth. And right now, their latest thing, which is getting quite popular, is foreign flags. They don't want any foreign flags in Canada. Canada has to be Canada first, only Canadian flags, only the maple leaf. And you can see in this right here, in Canada, We fly Canadian flags only. And I'm happy to tell all of you, I finally ratioed the fuck out of Dallas Brodie because it only took 2 seconds to look this up. It turns out she has been to pro-Israeli rallies where she's given speeches where they were obviously brandishing a lot of Israeli flags, and she happens to be a pretty hardcore Zionist. So I don't know why this keeps happening, where the far right will do things, they'll be like, you know, I've seen it in the US time and time again. How many American politicians have you seen talk about, in America, we only fly the red, white, and blue. This is America. You know, I only want to see the American flag and patriotism. And then it turns out, well, yeah, that's her right here, speaking on a megaphone by someone who's got the Israeli flag draped around them. Here's another photo of it going down. That's taking place. I didn't think this was going to get this much traction on the far right app, by the way. This had 35,000 likes now. So I ratioed her pretty handedly into the stratosphere, which I'm pretty happy about. But if anyone thinks that this actually didn't happen, here's the actual news report of it taking place.
BCMLA has filed a private prosecution against Samidoun organizer. Samidoun, also known as a Palestinian Prisoner Solidarity Network, was listed as a terrorist group by Canada in 2024 over alleged ties to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine.
Really, I had been calling in the legislature and online for the Attorney General to lay charges against this group because they're calling for death and they're burning flags, and the group has been distributing materials that teach people how to do multifaceted, coordinated terrorist attacks.
So this was back when she was a conservative. She still, as you saw that pop up, BCMLA. This was before she got kicked out of her own party for being too racist. And it's kind of wild right now that they're doing this entire kind of like Canada was built, not stolen. It was built by white people. We will not be called settlers because we are actually the builders and all this other kind of stuff. They're also saying that like, you know, Indigenous people had no civilization. They're saying that they were savages, that they came over and they brought them things like roads and, you know, it's weird though because they're also hardcore anti-vaxxers. They are extreme anti-vaxxers, so they hate science. I love how they on one end will talk about civilization and talk about how, like, you know, they are the pioneers that built this country, which at the end of the day, you're living in 2025 just like me. Like, you know, I wouldn't be like, hey, by the way, I want to take pride in all the thousands of things that I never actually did. Like, you know, I wasn't even alive. I didn't exist yet. But sure, that's the narrative we're going to take. But I kind of like some aspects of, I don't know, modern medicine. I think that people who discovered, I should say, vaccines and vaccination and the advancements in technology behind them have saved countless amounts of lives. I think it's great. And I think people who are pushing for anti-vax measures are bringing back measles, which is just wild. But yeah, she was there. She was a keynote speaker. You'll notice that there is a lot of non-Canadian flags. There's a lot of flags from other countries. And it's just weird now that she's trying to say that she happens to be part of the movement that says Canada first, Canadian flags only. But for Israeli flags, that I guess doesn't count, which is wild. But you can also push a lot of extreme rhetoric as long as you have people believe. Well, you know what? I'll put it this way. They really do not respect the intelligence of their own base. The same thing can be said about the far right in Canada right now, trying to say that Canadians and the public healthcare system in Canada is a disaster and that Canada has to drop it and join America in having more of a privatized, insurance-based healthcare system. And the reason is a very scary headline that came out a couple days ago. And this is also the mainstream media that is in, I would say, you know, in large part collaborating with the push to get rid of public healthcare, socialized healthcare, having a public payer option. And that headline was very scary. It said that a lot of people have died on a waiting list in Canada because obviously under the public healthcare system, there's a triage system. And while people are waiting, they're dying. And that's, you know, very sad when you hear it.
Our healthcare is not free. It's got a cost, and I'm going to show you the cost. The cost is your life. In fact, more than 23,000 Canadians died on medical wait lists in the past year alone.
So that's the headline, right? 23,000 Canadians died on medical wait lists in the past year. That's terrible. Like, terrifying, terrible. You see that headline, and it does sound very scary. And, I saw it as well, and I was like, oh my God, that's really sad. I mean, there would be an argument right away that means that we should be funding the public system even more so that there can be more doctors, more nurses, people don't have to wait on the wait list as long. That's probably where my brain would go, right? Because I believe in, having a socialized healthcare system that people don't have to pay out of pocket every time they go to the doctor just for a checkup, or if they want to get like an x-ray done, or if they're worried about something, if you got a cut on your finger, you got a broken, bone, you don't have to worry if you're going to have to pay, a couple $1,000s to see a doctor or stuff like that. I kind of like that system, but I mean, if there's 23,000 people who died in wait lists in the past year while they're waiting for surgery, then the system is effectively broken.
In the past year alone. And this was done by a think tank, and they revealed that 23,746 patients died in Canada while waiting for surgeries or diagnostic procedures. And it's literally within the last year, from April 2024 until March 2025. And these deaths are only increasing each year. Since 2018, over 100,000 Canadians have died. And in order to gather all this data, they put freedom of information requests to over 40 provincial and territorial health bodies. And here's a perfect example. Debbie Fuster, a Manitoba mother of 3, was told she needed heart surgery within 3 weeks. Instead, she had to wait for more than 2 months, and she died on Thanksgiving. Finley was in excruciating pain when he went to the hospital.
So you may not have noticed it because it was actually kind of quick there in that jump cut, but we've moved on to a different story. It still sounds like it's part of the same story. I guess it is within the same wheelhouse, right? Now it's about a specific story about people waiting long times in ER and wait rooms. And I'm not going to tell you that parts of the Canadian healthcare system aren't broken in the same way the NHS is broken in Britain, in the same way there are a lot of public healthcare systems that have problems. But here's the issue. This article, if you were to read the entire thing of the 23,000 Canadians who died of medical wait lists in the past year, the thing he hasn't told you, and no right-winger has, is that those were overwhelmingly majority elective surgeries. Yeah, that part, it really hurts the narrative, so they haven't mentioned that, and they don't talk about that, but they were for elective surgeries. And here's the second part. The majority of people who died while waiting for the elective surgeries died for reasons that were unrelated to the surgeries. That part is just like, you gotta put that in there. If you don't include that part, say you need an elective surgery, which you should have access to, by the way. If someone has, say, difficulty breathing at night because they snore too much, you might need a special corrective surgery to get that. If you need an elective surgery for something cosmetic, such as you have a mole on your skin and it's not like, a form of cancer, it's not actually going to potentially cause you an illness or kill you, but like at the end of the day, you don't like it and you want to get it removed, you should still have access to an elective surgery. I'm not against people getting surgery if it is elective. But if you get hit by a car while you're waiting for that surgery, it got counted in those statistics. And this actually really goes to the fact that, like, the media is also complicit here. That headline is really scary. And you have to read through the article quite a bit to get to the parts where they actually bring up the facts that, hey, that these were majority elective surgeries and the majority of people who died while waiting died from things unrelated to the surgeries themselves. That part completely changes the headline from being scary to being, oh, okay, well, the system is broken. I'm not saying that. I am saying that there are certainly a necessity that we need more doctors, we need more nurses, we need more hospitals, we need more healthcare, we need more funding of all of that. Each province in Canada is different, by the way, in how they actually dictate the funds that are given to them by the federal government to be used on their healthcare systems. There's a lot to fix, and there's a lot of problems with it. But to then tell people the solution to this is to switch to an American-style private insurance system, which also has its problems. Right? There are problems not only outside of the fact that the majority of people who are uninsured are just going to be like, well, fucking good luck, but even people who do have insurance, there are various tiers of insurance, and there are various ways in which you might be also waiting to see someone, especially if it happens to be for an elective surgery. There are people who also die under the private insurance system as well. And if people are dying under a public healthcare system because they are waiting a very inordinate long time for an elective surgery and then dying in between when they're waiting and when that happens, and then they are counted in these statistics, that has to be what a headline runs with, or at least includes, because otherwise people like this are going to use it to say, hey, by the way, the whole system's broken. We need to have an American system. And that's not really fair, because that is obviously going to hurt the majority of people who otherwise couldn't afford healthcare. If you got people like Jordan Peterson, or Matt Walsh who are spending all day trying to get you really afraid of a topic, usually they will target it from a certain angle, right? You're going to get people like Matt Walsh and Jordan Peterson telling you should be afraid of trans kids ruining your children's sports. You should be afraid of immigrants ruining your job market. You should be afraid of them taking housing from you, stuff like that. All of it, again, is usually to benefit billionaires, to benefit the elites. They are usually very, very rich and wealthy people. They're very well off. They have very cozy jobs being podcasters and YouTubers, or traveling speaking engagement book salesmen in the case of Jordan when he used to work. And every single one of them will push a narrative and is very effective. Hey, by the way, this is a cause you should be worried about. This is what you should concentrate on. And this is what you should be angry about, because there's a lot of things fucked up and wrong with the world, right? There are. This is why they appeal very often to young men, because young men do have a lot of things that concern them, and the world is getting more difficult, especially under capitalism. And when you have an entire gender where your ability to make it as a man is based on your ability to become a provider for a family, and that gets harder and harder, and there's now a very strong social and gender dynamic that is changing as more women are going to university, more women are graduating from university, and more women are getting high-paid jobs because they are going to university and they are becoming the next leaders of tomorrow. And a lot of those women are suddenly deciding, hey, by the way, I do not need to be financially reliant on a man whose entire worldview has been cooked up in this weird idea that I need to be some kind of a 24/7 service made for them. I don't really want that. That is happening in real time right now. The media hyper-focuses on the loneliness epidemic of men, and it's almost always exclusively men, right? Men are very depressed, men are very lonely, men have all these problems, and that much is true. But there is also a large amount of depression and anxiety and loneliness amongst women as well. The media doesn't hyper-focus on that. Instead, they always talk about this narrative that really is directed in one direction, as if men are owed something, or men have some kind of inherent birthright to be able to have a life in which you need to work hard, you need to play by the rules, and if you do that, you'll get a high-paying job. If you get that high-paying job, you'll be able to get a family, you'll be able to take care and provide for that family, and as such, your wife should also be, again, nurturing, be a mother to your children, look after the family, take care of the kids, clean the house, cook you meals, service you sexually on a regular basis as per your requirements, and then everyone lives happily ever after. And we keep doing this on repeat. And this dynamic change that's happening right now, where less men are getting into university, less men are staying into university, and as a result, less men are getting these high-paying jobs, well, yeah, it's suddenly creating this dynamic in which people are wondering, why is it that there are all of a sudden these large percentages of women who are going further and further left politically? It's unexplainable to me. I don't understand it. What's happening there? And it's like, well, they are in a world in which this same gender dynamic is being sold to everyone. And the worst miserable men on the planet, such as, again, your Matt Walshes, your Andrew Tates, your Jordan Petersons, your Sneekos, your Fresh and Fits, all of them, they are trying to sell an idea to young men who are going through their own troubles and have their own problems, that this is a problem because of feminism and because of the world being upside down. And because everything's backwards right now, women are being brainwashed by all these feminist ideas to not understand their place in society, and you are having your birthright taken from you. And this is going to continue unless something is done, to actually break this endless cycle of rich, miserable men, again, Matt Walsh, Jordan Peterson, selling an idea, a lie, to their audience that perpetuates them being unhappy. And as they continue to be unhappy, the world will, be in a cycle where, guess what? When a far-right government, say like Donald Trump, comes into power, what are they doing with their power? They're using it to take away the bodily autonomy of women. They're using it to attack women, to take away their rights, to try and revert them back into a time where they don't have access to credit cards or bank accounts, where they're forced to be in perpetual servitude to men, where they don't really have an option to leave an abusive relationship, no-fault divorce. All that kind of stuff is what they're constantly fighting and working towards. And it's not at all a shock to me that women don't want that. That women on the other end are like, oh, okay, so this is what that side of the political aisle is doing. That's what their project is. Okay, well then, fuck that noise. I am not going to be part of this Christian church. Right now, the biggest exodus of any group is Gen Z women from religion. They're leaving it at such a high percentage right now that it's actually skewing the numbers in a way that right now the right are trying to be like, what the hell is going on? It's like, well, the thing that is being sold to women on the other end, where it's like, you have a place in society and that's what you're supposed to do, and you need to get back in the fucking kitchen. You need to get back and out of the workplace and let men handle everything. And it's like, well, that system hasn't been working out well for anybody, including men. This whole system has been destructive for every single person. Doesn't matter if they're a man or a woman, or a woman. The whole system itself is fundamentally broken and seems to really only benefit a very select few men at the very top. You know, if we combine the capitalism and the patriarchy, if we combine the white supremacy and the systems and the hierarchies and the artificial structure that this is making, there's only a few people that benefit from any of it. Everyone else gets fucked. And as everyone else gets fucked, they don't actually fight that system. They fight each other, which keeps all the people at the very top completely safe.
First off, thank you so much to our patrons for making this show possible. We could not fund it without you. And if you want to join, please check out patreon.com/theserfs to unlock bonus episodes, uncensored content, and all the good stuff. Thanks to Anna Loves Riley, Addercap, Bobby Lasers, Cheryl Alvarez, Comrade Junkie, Doug Caddy, Everything Important, Hegbard Salim, Multimondi, Omni, Political Papi, Preston Kroll, Quiet One 85, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Cernicus, Stellar Gwyn, Sebastian Demmel, Tigwick, and Words Greenwood.